Hey guys, Steve Moran here with another episode of Foresight TV. I had and I've got my guest today is Amanda Farley, and I'm going to ask you, Amanda, have you talk a little bit about who you are and what you're doing. I'm just a little bit discombobulated today. I set up a call with somebody in South Africa for 7 o'clock, and normally I don't do calls before 9 o'clock, and so I was sitting on the couch drinking coffee, and he messaged me saying, "Where are you?" And it's like, "Oh man!" And everything has been running late since then. So Amanda, we're going to get into it just a minute, but before we do that, let's run this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. Amanda, happy Friday and welcome. I met Amanda at the SMASH conference this past October, the Senior Living Marketing and Sales Conference, and she did one of the keynotes. It was an amazing conversation. We're going to talk about the new world of digital marketing and the things that are most important there. And so, Amanda, let's actually just start. I know you've got some history. I'd like to have you talk a little bit about who you are, what your company does, and I'd like to have you talk a little bit. You actually have some senior living history, right?
Yes. So my name is Amanda Farley. I'm the VP of Growth at AimClear. I've been at AimClear the last 2 years. Before that, I worked at another performance agency, and I have been working with senior healthcare since about 2014, 2015. And that has been through the location based, right? So whether that's like independent assisted memory care, but also things like hospice, even stay-at-home senior services, senior products that are being sold to caregivers has kind of been one of my more recent focuses. And I also do a lot in outside of the senior space and child healthcare as well. So been in the performance marketing, lead generation, demand generation game in healthcare for quite some time now. And super happy to be here. And thanks again, Steve, for inviting.
Well, I'm really, really excited about talking about this stuff. The world is just changing so much. So as you look at the world of digital marketing in general, and maybe related to this sort of the aging care services, what are the big topics, the hot issues that we need to be thinking about?
So right now in the industry, the big thing is when we think about our data, personal identified information, when we think about how we're looking at our analytics, there's a lot of changing in the industry with AI and machine learning. And then you compound that with things like special ad category changes at the channel level. Like there's a lot of shifts happening. To me this year, like if for my healthcare clients, it's like you need to know what your checklist is of things to like you need to start looking at. So right out the gate, it's, switching over to GA4. That has to be done by July. And that's going to impact every single channel. So you can make changes or updates and strategy on the channel level, but none of that's going to mean anything if your analytics isn't sound and going to carry you into the future. So there's
okay. I want to stop you for 1 second. If you're a marketing person, you probably know what she's talking about with G4, but maybe we should better talk.
Yeah.
Can you give a little bit more context for people who are maybe at the executive level or someplace else?
Yeah, absolutely. So from kind of the beginning of the digital age, we've been using Google Analytics, and specifically Universal has been the one that everyone has been using. So 99% of the time, most advertisers are using Google Analytics as their base that is telling all of their systems, right, how things are performing. And those things even tie into our sales systems, right? So Salesforce or HubSpot, any of those type of systems are also getting their data from Google Analytics. GA4 is really Google's response to a lot of the privacy concerns, and also, they're going to be sharing a lot less information with us, but it's the new analytics system that is going to replace Google Analytics as we know it today. And that's a huge change that I don't know if many like people are really in tune with like what that means at a holistic level, because it impacts everything that Google Analytics touches. So that's where that is. It's the new fancy name for Google Analytics, and it's a completely changed in system from Google.
Okay, I'm going to go real basic here for a minute.
Yep. Go ahead.
Why do analytics matter?
So the analytics are really going to be what's going to tell you where your leads are coming from, right? So when we go back to the very highest business goals of occupancy rates, right? How many leads are we getting in? Which care, like, is it for independent? Is it assisted? Like, where are these things coming from? And then you look at where investments are happening. Like, are we investing in Google? Is it Facebook? Is it out of home or traditional mail? And we're tracking back to what's performing to driving some of those business goals. Like, analytics is the foundation of a lot of that tracking of what's driving leads, and it's what's telling your marketing teams what's happening. And even within Salesforce, like, you can see that it was a Google Ads lead, or it was a, Bing lead, or usually you have like that connector that ports through that tells, like, which even tells the sales team that, oh, this is a digital lead and this is where it came from. So it really intersects both sales and your marketing teams.
So I think, is there, in all this change that's happening right now, and I know the GA4 has been big for us. We've built a bunch of custom dashboards that we use, that we look at our traffic every single day, and we're in the process of, we've been working on it for a couple months, so we will be ready. But it's a huge deal to everything needs to be rebuilt and reworked, and of course it all costs money. Is there any good news to all this change?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the machines are getting smarter, right? So there are some elements that are improving performance. I think there's still a lot of shakeup happening right now with transparency, which is a big thing, I guess, on the marketing side. But there also is the consumer protection side, right, with personal data and information. So it's for us in this space, it's just knowing, okay, how do we continue to evolve to make sure we're still hitting business goals, delivering an excellent experience in the sales and marketing process, as well as protecting the bottom line customer and all of that. So there is as we progress into the year, I think, like, one of the big changes that I'm seeing too is that there's been, and a lot of this has to do with what's happening in the economics, right, of the world right now, is where there was a time where everybody was kind of willing to pay whatever it took to get a new person. Like, it was like, whatever it takes, just new people in the door. And now there's kind of been this shift in focus on profitability, right? Like, what's the quality of what's coming in the door? Is this our ideal target? Are we spending the most effectively? Like, and we're talking about limiting, where's the ad spend bloat at? Where are marketing resources really going? And making sure that we're keeping super focused, because we are going into, an economic time that is another level of unknown. And every year, has kind of been that since the pandemic. I mean, there's been a lot of shifts since then. Like, it hasn't really stopped. And this year, I think what's going to be interesting is we've got another economic shift coming that's going to impact everything, right? So those are things that, from a marketing and sales perspective, it's just planning for what does that mean for our day-to-day? What does that mean for what our strategies are? There was a day, I think I talked about this at the conference, Steve, where we could be like, oh, in quarter one, we do this, and in quarter two, we do that. And like, that just doesn't work anymore in this world, like the entire world's ecosystem outside of digital. Like, there's always things that are changing up the supply chain now. And it's, the consumer behavior has really shifted over the last 3 years.
So I think that we have these sort of two buckets of organic and paid, right? And it kind of, you touched on the paid side a little bit, but I want to actually talk a little bit about organic first. Does it make any difference? How do you figure out whether the traffic is any good that's coming to your website? And maybe the big question really is how do I find the right people? So, and so one of the things as I was prepping for our conversation today, one of the things I was thinking a lot about is how do you make sure you're actually targeting the right people? And I'll give you a couple of examples that not directly related to senior living operators, but we maybe 6 years ago, I did this story about this company that senior living residents created handbags. And it was a cool story. It was a great story. But I think until probably 6 months ago, it would sometimes still pop up as one of the top read articles on our website, like 6 years afterwards. And I guarantee you the people reading it had nothing to do with our industry. So how do you make sure you're actually hitting the right people? I have a lot of questions.
Yeah. So, I mean, it starts with research. All of this starts with understanding the digital research side of the audience. So it's looking at what are people searching for? What are people looking for? How does that look competitively in the space? Like one of the things that makes my team different right now than I would say maybe others in the digital space is on the organic side. We track all the way back to like return value and investment, which traditionally from an SEO perspective, like I think there's people in the industry that do great SEO, but they don't always track that back to, did I get a sale? Did I get a lead? And what kind of bottom line am I driving? So for us, it's not just looking at, okay, what are people searching? It's what do we want to rank for that's going to drive those bottom line business goals, right? Like it's really that quality over quantity. And that also kind of helps with the spend, right? So when we think about the paid side of things, like we don't want to spend money on somebody that's not going to be our best fit. And there's a lot of really great first and third party tools now that you can use to kind of help collect some of the target audience data, which goes back to kind of that Google Analytics and how we're collecting even our contact list, how we're segmenting them in our marketing systems, and allowing to have some feedback loops happening that work, because these, as we move to more machine learning in an ad platform perspective, they're only as good as the data we give it. So we need to tell it, like you can actually connect Google Ads to Salesforce, and you can connect that link to tell the system, I want people that are at this level of the buying journey and that match this style of lead, right? We don't necessarily just want somebody who's just calling and it's like many times in the senior space, exclusions are just as important as inclusions on audiences. Like we don't want residents calling the phone number for ads because there's a user issue, right? They're like Googling to call the front desk and then they click an ad and then they're calling. So it's making sure you're excluding things like the right IP addresses and home office and all of that too, right? So when we talk about finding the right people, sometimes that's also telling the system who isn't the right people. That makes sense.
It does. You're making my head hurt though.
Okay.
So let's I want to actually go a little bit practical. I wasn't going to quite do this way, but I think this is the right way to do it. So I come to you. I'm a senior living operator. I've got, I don't know, a dozen locations, because there are lots of people who sort of fit in that category, and say, we're getting some digital leads. We know digital is the thing. We're getting a lot of leads from A Place for Mom and Caring, and we're always happy with any leads, but those things are really stupidly expensive, and I want to do it better. And so it sounds like the first thing you've got to do is sort of figure out what your search terms are that you need to focus on, and how do you do that? And maybe I'm missing something there.
Yeah. So really with Google, like it just from a search term perspective, when we think about organic search, like we can find through Google tools what the top search keywords are, right? So what are people looking for? Like one of the things that's important to know is that some communities, they may call it assisted living, even though they're looking for independent, right? Some areas might call it a nursing home more likely than looking for assisted living, because that's like the education of that market. They don't know that there's a difference. So when we're doing our Google research and we're looking at some of those search terms, like that does help make a difference at the foundational level. But second to that, like if I think about anytime we're talking about multi-location, it's understanding that every market is going to be a little different. So yes, there are some foundational things we can do across the board, but you can't treat Kentucky the same way that you would treat Sacramento, California, right? Like, and obviously those are two polar opposite kind of areas. But when we talk about going into a Google search market, for example, your cost per leads are going to vary based on those types of market, like what those markets are. So not only is it audience based, but it's location based. And then if you take that to the social level as well, that's another factor. Like we're continuing to see right now with social that we're seeing audiences skew higher in age demographic. So traditionally, you wouldn't think that TikTok was the best platform for senior living. However, the caregiving audience and influencers in that space is actually pretty remarkable. And depending on what service you're offering, right, and where you're at, like that could be a great option for you. So I think part of it is thinking a little bit outside of the box too, of like not just search, but if my location is in whatever like wherever you're at, like you have to look at that market and say, okay, what are my audiences here interested in? Like that people are only going to drive a certain amount of way, right, to get to a senior living community specifically. And that radius will change, right? So if you're in Chicago, that's a high dense market. You're probably not going to drive as far as somebody who's out in like rural America. Like they'll drive a little farther. So those are things too that have to be considered, because if you're in Chicago, you probably only want to target people, let's say within maybe a 10-mile radius, or maybe in a rural area, it's maybe like a 30-mile radius. So there's a piece of it too, depending on which locations you're trying to market or where your maybe struggle points are, because as long as I've been in this business, there's always a struggling community somewhere, right? Like there's always like, you could have a really beautiful portfolio, and then there's like one that you're like, why isn't this working? And a lot of times it's because that those like location specific strategies haven't been implemented. And that even goes with the budget, like how you want to invest, like how much do you need to invest into a Google or a Bing or a Facebook in a particular market to get the end impact. Is that more in line with kind of what you're?
No, that's actually really super helpful. I'm a little hung up. I want to come back to for just a minute because I'm just intrigued by it totally. Let's talk about TikTok for a minute. We'll go back to the other stuff, but I'm a big fan of TikTok. We have a TikTok channel. We don't post on it very often, but we post occasionally on stuff there. And I tend to, when I look at senior living, I tend to think of it in the context of primarily hiring younger staff, although there's a guy that I follow on TikTok occasionally called Old Man Steve, so you can see why that has a little extra affinity. And he's got, I don't know, 1.5 million followers or something. I've had a little bit of discussion about getting him on Foresight TV, but we've never been able to quite make that work. So I just love a little more expansion on your thoughts on TikTok as a marketing vehicle.
So,
and then we'll go back on track.
Yeah. So TikTok is awesome. And the demographic definitely has shifted from the early days of when it got started. And like some of my favorite influencers right now to follow, I don't know if you follow Life with Grams. Oh my gosh, it's so great. But it's real world, caregivers that are caring for their parents at home, or, like just the stories, the people side of this business, right? Because I think when we get into the marketing and sales meetings, sometimes we forget about the humans that are really in the communities, right? That are moving their loved ones in, and like who they are and what those things that they go through. And if you look at channels like Life with Grams, like it's amazing. It tells that story in a day-to-day format. And I think as a community, I think there's a lot of stories that you could tell at your communities about the life of the seniors that live there, because from all of the times I've ever visited communities, they're having cocktails sometimes, like on the more independent side, they've got their, they're playing games, they're socializing. And even when you get into the higher acuity areas of, even like with memory care and all of that, like, hey, they have a nursery, right, with baby dolls, and and what does that do for their enrichment? Or as a personal story, when my grandma was suffering with dementia and was going through that process, she used to work in an office when she was in her working life. And when she would get up in the middle of the night and like just wouldn't go back to sleep and all the things, they would give her office things to do. Like they would say, hey, Roseanne, can you help us over here? And they would give her all these, like, but it made her feel fulfilled. It gave her a purpose. Can you help us with laundry? She, oh yeah, I'd love to do that. And they gave her these things. And through that time, like, and that made her life better. it made her life better during that time. So when I think of stories like that, like those are the stories that could be told right now through TikTok. Or when you think of the nursing staff, right? Like what are the nursing staff stories that they have and the connections that they make with the seniors while they work there? Like when I think of senior living, and I think about the time I've spent with the communities, I think about the people, I think about the ones that converted their living rooms to where they were building model airplanes, and the ones that also had a paint studio and all of these things, like those human stories. And I think TikTok is a bridge in the social space where you could make those real connections with people, and that would support your brand and your business goals, right? So it's a little bit of all of that, which I think just is amazing.
So, you have hit on one of my 2 or 3 really huge pet peeves, and that's storytelling. And we are, as an industry, so bad at it. And as you were talking, one of the things that occurs to me is that perhaps the reason storytelling gets lost is that people haven't figured out how to tie that into driving traffic to their websites and keywords and converting and that kind of thing. And so people tend to do, I write an article about what's so great about senior living, and I can get all my keywords and my key phrases in there and drive traffic. Much harder to do that in storytelling. How do you mix this storytelling with this sort of SEO formula?
Yeah. So when you think about the SEO or the paid search side, right? I'm looking for this, I make it to your website. Okay, that's like transaction number one. The story comes when they get there. What is that, right? Like that's a piece of this too. So when we're talking in senior living, I see a lot of talking around the senior and not a lot of talking to the senior and from their perspective. And there's a lot to be said from that side of it. Like when an adult child is searching for their loved one, they're thinking things in their mind like, is my mom going to be safe? Is she going to be happy? Is she going to have friends? Right? When you think about all those big emotional considerations that go in, what is your website doing and saying to help in that buying decision before they even pick up the phone to call, a salesperson, right? Like there's something to be said about the power of video content, right? The power of imagery, the power of written content. And I know we've got the driving lead side or that driving traffic side, right? Which is your SEO and your paid search. And with social, like there's a sense of people are going to go to your social platforms too, to see, is this the kind of place I want my mom or parent to live, right? Like, is this like, what are other people saying about it? What are they doing? What kind of events are they having? Right. So when you look at even your social presence, you have to look at it outside of just like transaction based thinking. Like it has to be bigger than that. Especially in senior living where you have, this is a longer buyer cycle typically, unless there's an event that happens, right? A triggering event, like somebody falls or something like that. And it's an emotional and financial investment that's very large. And I think marketing and sales in this industry has to again think about that human component within their ad experience, within their website experience, because at the end of the day, like this is one of the hardest decisions people have to make within their lifetime, and and that can't get forgotten along the way.
Yeah. Well, I've had over the last 6 or 8 weeks, maybe 3 months, I've spent a lot more time in senior living communities for longer periods of time. So I've been able to sit with probably 4 communities, maybe 3 or 4 dozen residents, and just have conversations. And one of the questions I always ask is, why did you move into senior living? And shall we try this as a quiz for you?
Nice.
What do you think? There was one reason for moving in that I heard from every single person I talked to. Any guesses? It's not what I'm gonna prep it a little bit by saying it's not what I wanted it to be.
Yeah. Is this from the seniors' perspective?
From the seniors' perspective, and these are essentially all independent living people.
Because my kids made me. No,
that's actually a good answer, but it's not it. It actually, and it surprised me what it was.
I'd have.
And if you don't want to be put on the spot, that's okay too.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I would have to, and I don't know if I could pick one, but I would have to imagine that it's something about making sure that there's like a peace of mind, I think, to it. And I think there's also that not having to worry about running a household, not having to worry about, medication and reminders and driving. And like, there's a lot of, so I think there's a peace of mind, there's a social piece to it. And I do think there is like, I want my kids to know I'm okay. Like because when they're not in senior living and they're at home, their kids are constantly worrying about them. Is mom okay? They're calling, they're showing up. There's a lot of stress involved in that process. So my guess would be peace of mind in some capacity.
Yeah. So yeah, you've actually hit the nail on the head. I term it as safety, is physical safety, but it's exactly that. I was really shocked by it. We tend to sort of assume that that's everybody does that, but I'm not sure that that's true. And I'm actually not sure that in marketing efforts we spend enough time talking about how we're going to keep you safe. Now, of course, that requires that you actually can keep the promise, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I think that goes back to what are the service offerings you have, right? The community, like whether that's a la carte style of room. What I've seen a lot over the years is things like couples, right? Moving in sometimes to more independent style
yeah.
because there's maybe one of like the husband or wife like isn't doing as well and the other one is definitely more independent but they can't take care of the other one themselves anymore, so like sometimes moving in that capacity can be important, but again I think that the theme though is like understanding that there's still humans behind all of this. So it's like how do we 2023 to me is going to be continuing to look at how do we mash up the machine data AI, all these big fancy words with like the human element of what is senior care. And
So, what role do you see Chat GPT, artificial intelligence for writing playing in this? And I will tell you that I used it to actually come up with the title for our this Foresight TV today. I did some tweaking in it, but I
yeah,
played with it to make this title here.
awesome. Yeah, I think it's great. It's a new tool. I think we're going to see some evolution with it like we do anything, especially when it comes out of the box. I think what's amazing about this is how accessible it is to like the average user, which is different in AI than like you've really seen in the past. I do think Google's a little ahead on if people are mass producing content for SEO using it, which would go back to what some of their latest algorithm updates have been. So I do think keep that in mind. Also, not all of the information they spit out is always accurate. So you still have to use a human mind behind strategic thinking and editing. And wait, let me fact check this myself because it is just that it's a machine. It's not perfect for sure. And I think too, like there is detection tools. I'm not sure if you're aware, but there is like AI detection tools. And I think we're going to see a lot of that evolution happening within the education space, which will, it's a whole other discussion. But yeah, I think it's a great new tool that, is new in the industry. Everybody's raving about it. But I think from an AI perspective, like what's going to shake up the lead side of this space, it's going to be in the ad campaign piece of machine learning. So
talk to me a little bit more about that.
So right now, the trend is that the search engine, specifically Google, are pushing for I'll call them smart campaigns or campaigns that are taking data to make decisions and to decide where your ad place is, to decide which search term you come up for. And then they're also giving you less information about where it's being shown or what was actually searched. So there's a quality control component to it. Now, when machines are given really good data and information, kind of like a smart mind giving Chat GPT really smart ideas, right? Like that, you're going to get a good result. So if you're really good at segmenting and using your data and coming up with like exclusion and targeting strategies, you're going to see good results. But there's still this, if you've got a team that maybe isn't keeping up or has got a set it and forget it mentality, I think we're going to see a lot of issues with that this year because it's a quality control, it's a quality control thing. And I think back to my my enterprise marketing days where certain countries wouldn't even let us use Google Analytics because they were like, we don't trust Google. And won't get into naming anyone, but that was like a real thing. And I think that's going to continue to be a thing as it relates to brand safety and not wanting to end up on websites like Breitbart, right? Or not wanting to because that's kind of where this balance is right now. So when you think about display, video, and honestly, most of the larger brands anyways are using more of that like OTT or programmatic filtering that has extra exclusions and brand safety on it anyways. But I think that'll be the story to be told. And my recommendation to anyone would be talk with your marketing teams about the changes that are happening. Make sure you fully understand, make sure they fully understand, because if you wait until July or March, when all this stuff is already rolling out, it's gonna be too late and you're gonna have downshifts in your sales process. And you don't want, getting ahead of it is the answer. That is part of the answer. Don't wait.
Yeah. I want to take just a couple of we're about out of time, but I want to sort of bullet a couple of things that are from some notes when you talked at Smash. You said we need to change how we think about marketing. And that's sort of what our broad topic. Any more thoughts on that?
Oh my gosh.
I know it's big.
That's so big. That's so big.
One or two sentences.
I would say anything that you have to always be ready to evolve. You have to change the way that you're thinking about, we've always done it this way. This is the way we're going to do it. That does not exist anymore in this ecosystem. I don't see that going away anytime soon. So anything that you have to continually be ready to think outside the box. You have to have multidisciplinary teams that are willing to change and make changes quicker, which I know that goes into approval processes and all that stuff. But I think it's the agility, changing marketing, change that really comes down to agility. How agile are you going to be in a business? How agile are you going to be as a team? And that really it can't just be always a in and out transaction, although we like to talk about it that way. And there are a lot of things in performance marketing where it is that, right? We return on investment, all of those things, but it is a lot bigger than that. There's a lot of outside factors at play that we can't forget. There's there's wars happening that mess with supply chains. There's pandemics that happen. There's layoffs that happen that change. There's so many other things at play right now, that are outside of marketing and sales or our control. And I think as we continue to push forward, it's knowing that it's bigger than marketing and you have to have that agile approach. Yeah, that's really
perfect. So I'm I want to hit one more thing that you said, because I think this is absolutely so critical. How does it feel to be having your words quoted back at you? The most successful teams I've ever worked with are the ones where sales, the customer experience, facility staff, and those are actually serving the consumers are all talking and planning together. And I think most businesses, not just senior living, have this silo mentality. Can you talk about this idea of using a team approach to digital marketing?
Absolutely, because that is where I see the best success and the biggest mistakes when that doesn't happen. I saw this in a data example even earlier today of how the data is called in Salesforce versus what it's being called in marketing systems. And you can't properly report if those things aren't talking to each other properly, which impacts two different teams.
Right.
You're always going to have this bigger, whether it's, C-suite investors, you have this bigger business goal initiative that has to be hit. And that's super important that we know what the goalpost is. But then a layer down of that, we've got sales teams that are on the ground having these conversations with real humans, right? That are hearing the problems, that are walking them through what the process is. You've got your experienced team that's working with the seniors day to day, that's working with the loved ones day to day. You've got your executive chefs, your facilities teams, all of these people are interacting with your customer. And at the end of the day, it's not just how do we achieve the goal, but it's understanding all those different perspectives. Because you may miss something really important. Like if you don't know that on every new tour that they also take them through, you know, this dining experience, and then they also do this other thing, that could be a critical piece that you miss in marketing that actually could help you make a huge differentiator from your competition. Like, so there is this, there's the data and communication loop, even ongoing, but even just in the, what are the top things that people ask you? What do people love the most about living here? What are the things that, like, what are the, you know, if we're going to talk about dining, like, what does everyone rave about at this community? Like, what are the things, like, what does everyone get excited about? What are the events that they love to do that they tell all their friends about? How does the parent feel after the first meeting to the second meeting? Like, even just asking those questions can make such a difference in your marketing content. And then that all then ties back right to sales, because at the end of the day, marketing's job is to help drive into sales. But even the best marketing in the world doesn't help if that communication loop isn't closed, because if the sales team doesn't know that we're doing a conquesting campaign, maybe against a competitor, and then they get a call that sounds a little funny, they're gonna be like, this isn't the right thing, because they didn't know that there was a campaign associated with it that, you know, ties back to a larger initiative. So it's really having that full team approach is where the magic happens. And even on reporting on results, like, I like to ask each person involved from a stakeholder perspective, what do you want to see in reporting? And if I ask a social media manager, they're going to tell me they want to see what creative performed best, right? They're going to want to tell me like which messaging worked. If I ask a CEO, he's going to tell me I want to see leads, return on investment, how much did we spend, and what, like, give me the 5 things that what worked and what did we learn and what are we doing next? Like, but if you have those questions, if you do that in the front, you set yourself up for the success. Like, when everything lives in silos, you get things like product teams updating websites, not telling the marketing team, and things breaking, and then ad traffic goes down for 4 days, and we miss our sales goal because a change on the website happened and nobody told the marketing team. And so ads were running and money was wasted. So it's like, though, it has to be synergetic. Like, it has to be.
Yeah, it's so important in my team. We've got a fairly small team, but we meet we have several gatherings with different groups during the week. On Friday, we do a big team meeting, and we do a little bit of business, but mostly it's just making sure we're about on the same page. And we just see magic come out of that. So I absolutely love that. We are out of time. We are past out of time. First off, I want to give Jada, can you pop up the contact? So if you want to talk to Amanda about what she's doing, here's how you can reach her. And I always forget to do this, Jada. I feel terrible about it after we're done, but I want to give Jada on my team, Jada Clint, just a shout out for making all the magic happen behind the scenes, because I could never do it and have good conversations as well. Amanda, thank you very much. Thank you for your passion. This was an amazing conversation. We should do this again in like 6 months or a year, and it would be really fun to just talk about what's changing, what's changed since we've heard the talk today, because I know it is just so different right now. So
it is definitely.
With that, why don't you hang on for a minute? I'm going to run our outro and just want to close it out and catch up.
Cool. Sounds good.